climax of the air battle. The Luftwaffe launched its largest and most concentrated attacks against London. Germany's radar technology and the force of the country behind them, the RAF was able to claim superiority in the skies.
So here we are in the World War II gallery and featuring at this point the Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain took place basically between July 10th, 1940 up through the end of October 1940. In actual fact, they celebrate every year Battle of Britain Day as being September the 15th, which has to do with the date that Hitler apparently changed his mind about invading England. After Dunkirk, they left behind a considerable amount of their armament, and they were in a very tenuous position. Europe had basically been overrun by the Germans all the way through France, all the way and including France. And at one point, General Wagland said, "The Battle of France is over. I expect the Battle of Britain is about to begin." And on July the 10th is when it started. Hitler's idea in the first place, according to some people, was basically to have a peace treaty of some sort with England. But the English were not having it. And they were ready to fight as long as they could. Fortunately, at about the time that the battle started, they were about the equivalent amount of strength between military. The British, talking about the fighters, substantially had two types of fighters. They had the Hurricane, or Hurricane as they say, and the Spitfire. The Germans basically, as far as fighters are concerned, had the BF or ME-109. Hitler started what he called Operation Sea Lion, and his idea was they were going to build barges to come across the channel to invade England with paratroopers. They didn't build that many of the barges because of the fact that the British found out what they were up to and were bombing the area. So in the meantime, it was mostly an air war between the sides, between the British, which was represented by the Royal Air Force, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, the Canadian Air Force. When it was all said and done, the British lost about 1,700 airplanes. The Germans lost about 1,900 airplanes. Civilian deaths were somewhere in the neighborhood of 23,000 because of the bombing that was going on. About the same time, towards the end of September, Hitler decided, we're just going to bomb England. And they started doing bombing raids, which was called the Blitz. The Blitz actually overlapped with the Battle of Britain clear through the end of June of the next year of 41. The amphibious assault never happened. Number one, because of the fact that they didn't have the number of barges, number one. And the most important part, which is my opinion, is that the seas rose, and in September, the North Sea is not exactly a place you want to be, or that is the English Channel. High winds, rain, storms, high waves. It would not have worked. Remember, in our invasion of the European continent, we had over 1 million men, and it was a beautiful day in the spring. So I think to a large extent what stopped the invasion was the winter weather was coming on. Both sides used the same sort of tactics, except one thing the British had that the Germans really didn't appreciate was the radar system. It was called chain home radar. And these were radar stations. They didn't look like a radar today, but it was allowed the British to vector airplanes towards the oncoming bombers that the Germans would have, and get their altitude, airspeed, so they knew where to intercept. At one particular place, this was all put together. You may have seen it where they have the boards where they're moving things around and alerting certain sectors. This is the idea of Commander Dowding. Dowding's idea was to get the things linked up so that they could effectively anticipate and direct your airplanes to the incoming Germans. The problem with the German airplanes, they did not have a lot of range. They had maybe taken off from France, from Abbeville, France, which is represented here by the yellow nose, the Abbeville boys, as they call them, had yellow noses. They were very well trained, having participated in the battle all the way across Europe and also in the North African campaign. The British to start off with were largely young men, college boys to some extent, who, joined to save their country. One of the things the British had that the Germans didn't realize was the ability to build airplanes very quickly. The average Spitfire cost about $5,000, and they were building between 150 and 300 per month. The famous quote by Churchill, what we always hear is, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much by so many to so few," because the fighter pilots of the English, the RAF fighter pilots, saved the country from invasion and thereby saving thousands, perhaps millions of lives, and allowed it the time for the United States to come into the war. And when the United States finally got involved in the war, it was the ability for the United States to build airplanes and train aircrew that allowed us to prevail in Europe and in the Pacific theater.